The November rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Horizon Industries, creating a rhythmic symphony that filled the sleek modern office. Natalie Rivers sat at her desk on the 14th floor, fingers dancing across her keyboard as she compiled the monthly marketing analysis report. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her reading glasses kept sliding down her nose as she concentrated on the spreadsheet before her. Coffee break? Sophie Chen appeared beside her desk, holding 2 steaming cups from the cafe downstairs. Sophie was Natalie's closest friend at work. A bright-eyed graphic designer with an infectious laugh and an unfortunate habit of believing every piece of office gossip, Natalie gratefully accepted the cup, savoring the rich aroma of caramel latte. "You're a lifesaver." "I've been staring at these numbers for 3 hours straight." They walked together toward the break room, a spacious area with comfortable chairs, abstract art on the walls, and a panoramic view of the city skyline. The afternoon sun was beginning to break through the rain clouds, casting golden light across the polished floors. "Did you hear about the charity gala next month?" Sophie asked, settling into one of the plush chairs. "Mr. Blackwood is personally organizing it. Apparently, he's donated $2 million already." Natalie rolled her eyes. "Of course he has. St. Julian strikes again, Natalie." Sophie gasped, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. "You can't talk about him like that. He's amazing. Did you know he built this company from nothing? He started in a tiny apartment with just a laptop and a dream." "Every successful person has an origin story," Natalie replied, taking a sip of her coffee. "That doesn't make him a deity." Sophie leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "But have you seen him? Those eyes, that presence. When he walks into a room, everything just stops. People literally hold their breath." Natalie laughed softly. "That sounds like a medical emergency, not admiration. I'm serious. Last week, he personally helped Jennifer from accounting when her car broke down. He didn't send his driver, he actually drove her home himself. And remember when David's daughter needed surgery? Mr. Blackwood covered the entire cost anonymously. David only found out because the hospital made a mistake with the paperwork." "Actually nice," Natalie admitted. "But it doesn't explain why everyone treats him like he walks on water. He's just a man, Sophie. A very wealthy, very successful man, but still just a man." Derek Morrison, a colleague from the sales department, walked past carrying a folder. He paused when he heard their conversation. "You clearly haven't spent any time around him, Natalie. Julian Blackwood isn't just successful. He's brilliant, strategic, and he genuinely cares about people. That's rare in this industry." Natalie set down her cup, feeling slightly defensive. "I'm not saying he's a bad person. I'm just questioning why everyone worships him like he's perfect. Nobody's perfect." "Maybe you should get to know him before judging," Derek suggested, with a slight edge to his voice before walking away. Sophie bit her lip. "He has a point, you know. You've been here for 8 months and you've never even spoken to Mr. Blackwood, because I'm a marketing analyst and he's the CEO of a billion-dollar company," Natalie explained. "Our paths don't exactly cross. Besides, I'm not impressed by wealth and power. I want to know what someone's really like when the cameras aren't watching." "Fair enough," Sophie conceded. "But I still think you're missing out. There's something special about him." Natalie shook her head, smiling. "You're all under some kind of spell. I refuse to believe one man can be everything people claim. There has to be something else. Some reason everyone's so devoted. Maybe he's just really good at public relations." Or maybe a deep, smooth voice said from the doorway, "He's standing right behind you." The moment everything changed, Natalie's blood turned to ice. She spun around so quickly she nearly knocked over her coffee cup. Standing in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame with his arms crossed, was Julian Blackwood himself. He was taller than she'd expected, with dark hair that had just a touch of silver at the temples. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and his white shirt was open at the collar. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep brown, almost black. With an intensity that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed defenses, Sophie had gone completely pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Mr. Blackwood," Natalie managed, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. "I didn't realize you were there." "Clearly," he replied, and there was something in his tone, not anger, but amusement mixed with curiosity. He pushed away from the doorframe and walked into the room with a fluid grace that commanded attention. "I came to refill my coffee, but I found something far more interesting instead." He moved to the coffee machine, his movements unhurried and deliberate. Natalie watched as he selected a plain black coffee. No sugar, no cream. Simple, direct, unadorned. "I apologize if I offended you," Natalie said, lifting her chin slightly. She refused to cower, even though her knees felt weak. "I was just expressing my opinion." Julian turned to face her, cup in hand. His eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her skin feel warm. "Your opinion that I'm just a man who's good at public relations?" "I didn't mean no, please," he interrupted, gently raising one hand. "I find your honesty refreshing. Most people in this building treat me like I'm made of glass. They're so busy trying to impress me that I never get to hear what they really think." Sophie had somehow managed to disappear from the room without Natalie noticing. Clever friend, abandoning her in her moment of need. "So you're not angry?" Natalie asked, genuinely surprised. "Angry?" Julian smiled, and the expression transformed his face from merely handsome to devastatingly attractive. "I'm intrigued. Tell me, Natalie Rivers, I know your name. What would it take to convince you that the respect I receive is earned rather than manufactured?" "You know my name?" "I know everyone's name," he said simply. "I make it a point to... You've been with us for 8 months. You have a degree in marketing and communications from State University. You graduated top of your class. And your analysis reports are consistently the most thorough and insightful we receive. You also have a habit of working late on Thursdays, and you prefer tea to coffee, except when your friend Sophie brings you caramel lattes." Natalie's eyes widened. "That's thorough." "I pay attention," Julian said, taking a sip of his coffee. "Especially to people who show exceptional talent. So, I'll ask again. What would convince you?" She considered the question carefully, aware that this was somehow a pivotal moment. "I suppose I'd need to see behind the curtain. To understand what drives you, what keeps you up at night, what you're like when nobody's watching and expecting perfection." Julian's eyes gleamed with something that looked like challenge mixed with approval. "Interesting answer. Most people would ask for a demonstration of wealth or power. You want to see vulnerability." "I want to see the truth," Natalie corrected. He set down his cup and pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. "How's your schedule for the next week?" "My schedule? Why?" "Because I'm taking you up on your challenge," Julian said, his voice carrying a note of something she couldn't quite identify, excitement perhaps, or anticipation. "1 week. You'll shadow me, attend my meetings, see exactly what my days look like. No filters, no pretense. Just the reality of who I am and what I do." Natalie's mouth went dry. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," he replied. "You questioned whether the respect I receive is earned. I'm giving you the chance to find out for yourself. Unless you're afraid of what you might discover." There was a challenge in his words, a dare wrapped in velvet. Natalie knew she should decline, should maintain professional distance, should not complicate her career with whatever this was. But something in his eyes held her captive, a promise of truth, of authenticity, of something real beneath all the corporate polish. "When do we start?" she heard herself ask. Julian's smile was slow, satisfied, and just a little bit dangerous. "Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. sharp. Wear comfortable shoes. We have a lot of ground to cover. I have a feeling you're going to challenge every assumption you've ever had about leadership, success, and what it really means to inspire loyalty." He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. "Oh, and Natalie, thank you." "For what?" "For being the first person in years to question me instead of just accepting the legend. You have no idea how rare that is, or how valuable." Then he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of cedar and sandalwood in his wake, and Natalie standing in the break room, her heart pounding, her mind racing, and the absolute certainty that her life had just shifted onto a completely unexpected path. The first doubts that evening. Natalie sat in her small apartment, staring at her closet and trying to figure out what one wore to shadow a billionaire. CEO. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from Sophie. who had apparently heard about the arrangement through the office grapevine and was demanding every detail. "Are you insane?" Sophie's text read. "Do you know how many people would kill for this opportunity?" Natalie typed back, "It's just a week of job shadowing." "No big deal? No big deal?" "Natalie, he specifically chose you. Out of hundreds of employees, he picked you to prove himself too. This is either the beginning of something amazing, or you're about to discover something that will change everything." Natalie set down her phone and walked to the window. Looking out at the city lights twinkling in the darkness, Sophie's words echoed in her mind. Why had Julian accepted her challenge so readily? What did he hope to prove, and what did she hope to learn? She thought about his eyes, the way they seemed to see past all her defenses to something deeper. She thought about his voice, confident, yet not arrogant, powerful, yet somehow gentle. And she thought about the way her heart had raced when he'd smiled at her, that slow, devastating smile that had made her forget to breathe. "Just curiosity," she whispered to her reflection. "You're just curious about whether he's really as good as everyone says." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. Something had passed between them in that break room, something electric and undeniable. A connection that went beyond professional interest, beyond simple curiosity. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Julian's assistant, Grace Hamilton, providing details for tomorrow morning's schedule. The message was professional, efficient, and ended with a simple note. "Mr. Blackwood is looking forward to working with you." Natalie read those words 3 times, searching for hidden meaning. Was this really just about proving himself? Or was there something more? And more importantly, was she ready for whatever answers she might find? She selected a simple navy dress and comfortable flats, laid them out for morning, and tried to convince herself that this was just another professional opportunity. Nothing more, nothing complicated. No, nothing that would append her carefully ordered life. But as she climbed into bed and closed her eyes, all she could see was Julian's face, his challenging smile, and his eyes that promised truth and perhaps something far more dangerous. The possibility that everything she thought she knew about success, power, and connection might be about to change forever. The sky was still dark when Natalie's alarm went off at 5 in the morning. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with questions and scenarios about what the day might bring. She dressed carefully in the navy dress she'd chosen, added a cream blazer, and twisted her hair into a professional bun. Minimal makeup, comfortable shoes, her leather portfolio completed the look. The lobby of Horizon Industries was nearly empty when she arrived at 5:45. The security guard, an older man named Paul, looked surprised to see her so early. "Big day, Miss Rivers?" he asked with a friendly smile. "You could say that," Natalie replied. Managing a smile despite her nerves, the elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world she'd never seen before. The executive floor was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city as dawn began to break. The decor was elegant but warm, with rich wood tones and comfortable seating areas that felt more like a high-end home than an office. "Miss Rivers," a woman's voice called. Grace Hamilton, Julian's executive assistant, walked toward her with a welcoming smile. Grace was in her early 40s, with silver-streaked auburn hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail and sharp green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Welcome. Can I get you coffee or tea?" "Tea would be wonderful." "Thank you," Natalie said, grateful for the woman's warmth. "Mr. Blackwood is finishing a call with Tokyo," Grace explained, leading Natalie to a comfortable seating area. "He should be done in about 5 minutes. He's been up since 4 working with our international teams." 4 in the morning. Natalie couldn't hide her surprise. Grace's smile was knowing. "Most days, yes. The man barely sleeps. He says he'll rest when he's 90. She returned moments later with a delicate cup of green tea. "I've worked for Mr. Blackwood for 12 years, and I've never met anyone with his level of dedication. Whatever you're expecting from this week, I promise you'll be surprised." Before Natalie could respond, a door opened and Julian emerged from his office. He looked different from yesterday still, impeccably dressed in a dark blue suit, but there was an energy about him. a focused intensity that reminded Natalie of a predator ready to spring into action. "Natalie," he greeted her with a warm smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you for being punctual. That's actually the first test." "Test," she echoed, setting down her tea. "Leadership lesson number 1, Julian said, gesturing for her to follow him. "Respect other people's time. If you expect excellence from others, you must model it yourself. I never ask my team to do anything I wouldn't do, and I never waste the resource we can never get back, time." They walked into his office. A spacious room with minimalist design and an enormous window that framed the city as it awakened. His desk was organized, but not obsessively so. With 3 monitors, a few framed photographs, and a stack of books that ranged from business strategy to philosophy. "Tell me about your morning routine," Natalie said. Pulling out a notebook, Julian raised an eyebrow. "Jumping right in?" "I like it." He poured himself coffee from a French press on the side table. "I wake at 4. 30 minutes of exercise, usually running or weights. Then I spend an hour reviewing international operations and responding to urgent communications from our Asian and European offices. By 6, I'm working on strategic planning or reading industry reports. I try to use the early morning hours for deep thinking before the chaos begins." "When do you eat breakfast?" "Usually around 8, between meetings. Grace makes sure I don't forget." He smiled. "Though I confess I often do." Natalie made notes, fascinated despite herself. "So you're already 3 hours into your workday before most people arrive." "Leadership isn't a 9-to-5 job," Julian said simply. "The decisions I make affect thousands of employees and their families. I don't take that responsibility lightly." Inside the machine, the next 4 hours were a whirlwind that left Natalie's head spinning. She sat in on 3 high-level meetings where Julian navigated complex negotiations with the grace of a diplomat and the precision of a surgeon. She watched him listen, truly listen, to every person who spoke, often asking follow-up questions that showed he'd absorbed every detail. In a meeting with the product development team, a young engineer named Chris nervously presented a new design that had gone over budget. Instead of the anger or disappointment Natalie expected, Julian leaned forward with genuine interest. "Walk me through your thinking, Chris," he said calmly. "Why did you choose this approach?" Chris explained his reasoning, and Julian nodded thoughtfully. "I see the logic. The issue isn't your innovation, it's brilliant. The issue is, we didn't allocate enough resources from the start because I underestimated the complexity. That's on me, not you. Let's restructure the budget and give you what you need to do this right." After the meeting, Natalie couldn't contain her curiosity. "You've just increased the budget by 30% without hesitation, because the idea is sound and the person is talented," Julian replied. "Would you rather I cut corners and deliver an inferior product? Or punish innovation because of my own budget miscalculation? Leadership means admitting your mistakes and supporting your team, not protecting your ego." They walked through the building, and Natalie noticed something remarkable. Every person they passed greeted Julian by name. He greeted them back not with the distant acknowledgement of a superior, but with genuine warmth. He asked about sick family members, congratulated people on recent achievements, and remembered details that showed he truly cared in the cafeteria. He insisted they eat lunch with a group of junior employees rather than in his private office. Natalie watched as he asked thoughtful questions about their projects, their challenges, and their ideas for improving the company. He took notes on actual suggestions, treating each person's input as valuable. "You're documenting what they say," Natalie observed quietly. "Of course," Julian said. "These people are on the front lines. They see problems and opportunities I never would from the top floor. Why wouldn't I listen to them?" The revelation in the parking garage by late afternoon, Natalie's feet ached despite her comfortable shoes. They'd toured 2 different facilities, met with community partners for the upcoming charity gala, and reviewed financial reports that made her head spin. Throughout it all, Julian maintained unwavering focus and energy as they walked toward the parking garage. Julian's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened, and Natalie saw a flash of something in his eyes, pain quickly masked. "I understand," he said quietly. "Yes, I'll handle it personally. Thank you for letting me know." He hung up and stood still for a moment, his jaw tight. "Is everything okay?" Natalie asked gently. Julian looked at her, and for the first time all day she saw behind the mask. He looked tired, troubled, and unexpectedly vulnerable. That was the hospital, he said slowly. One of our warehouse workers, Thomas Rivera, had a heart attack this morning. He's stable now, but ... double quotes he trailed off, rubbing his face. Do you know him personally? I know everyone personally, Julian said, his voice rough with emotion. Thomas has worked for us for 15 years. He has 3 kids in college. His wife passed away 2 years ago from cancer, and he's been working double shifts to cover tuition. Without another word, Julian changed direction, heading toward his car. Come with me! Where are we going? To the hospital. Thomas doesn't have any family in the city. He shouldn't be alone. The man behind the legend, the hospital, was a 20-minute drive through evening traffic. Julian didn't speak much, his hands gripping the steering wheel with controlled tension. Natalie watched him from the passenger seat, seeing layers she hadn't expected when they arrived. Julian navigated the hospital corridors with the confidence of someone who'd been there before. The nurse at the cardiac unit recognized him immediately. Mr. Blackwood, she said warmly. Thomas is awake and asking for you. In the hospital room, a man in his late 50s lay in the bed, connected to various monitors. His face lit up when he saw Julian. Boss, Thomas said, his voice weak but grateful. You didn't need to come. Yes, I did, Julian replied, pulling a chair close to the bed. He sat down, and Natalie noticed how he took Thomas's hand gently. How are you feeling? Like an elephant sat on my chest, Thomas joked. Then his eyes filled with tears. Julian, the bills. My kid's tuition. It's already handled, Julian said firmly. Your insurance will cover the medical costs. And I've arranged for a fund to cover your kid's tuition for the rest of their education. You just focus on getting better. Thomas's tears fell freely now. I can't let you do that. You're not letting me do anything, Julian said with a soft smile. You've given 15 years of loyal service to this company. You've mentored new employees, solved problems others couldn't, and you've done it all while raising 3 kids alone after losing your wife. This is what family does for family, Thomas. And that's what we are. Natalie felt her own eyes sting with tears. She stepped back, giving them privacy, but the image stayed with her Julian Blackwood. Billionaire CEO, holding the hand of a warehouse worker and calling him family, they stayed for an hour. Julian talked about work, about mutual friends at the company, about Thomas's kids and their achievements. He made Thomas laugh, helped him feel valued and important, never once making him feel like a charity case. On the drive back, Natalie finally spoke. You do this often, don't you? Visit employees in the hospital, cover their expenses, support them. Julian kept his eyes on the road. Would you think less of me if I said yes? No, Natalie said honestly. I'd think you've been hiding who you really are. He glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face. What do you mean? You let people think you're this untouchable, perfect leader. But the truth is messier and more beautiful than that. You care deeply, and it costs you something. I saw how much it hurt you to hear about Thomas. You carry the weight of every person in your company, don't you? Julian pulled into the parking garage and turned off the engine. For a long moment, he sat in silence, his hands still on the wheel. When I started this company, he finally said, I promised myself I would never forget what it felt like to struggle. My father died when I was 16, leaving my mother and me with nothing but debt. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college. I know what it's like to choose between eating and paying rent. I know what it's like to feel invisible. Like your life doesn't matter to anyone. He turned to face her, and in the dim light of the garage, she saw raw honesty in his eyes. Success gave me power and resources, but it also gave me responsibility. These people, my employees, they're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're humans with families, dreams, struggles. If I can use my resources to ease their burdens, why wouldn't I? That's not charity, Natalie. It's basic human decency. Natalie's throat felt tight. This is why they respect you. Not because you're wealthy or successful, but because you genuinely care. Some do, Julian acknowledged. Others respect the results, the growth, the stability I've built. That's fine too. I don't need everyone to love me. I just need to know I'm doing right by them. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the air between them charged with new understanding. One day down, Julian said with a slight smile, 6 to go. Still think I'm just good at public relations? Natalie smiled back, something warm blooming in her chest. I think I was wrong about a lot of things. Good, he said, his voice dropping lower. Because tomorrow, I'm going to show you the harder parts. The decisions that keep me up at night. The failures I've learned from. The weight of responsibility that never goes away. If you're going to understand who I really am, you need to see it all.
Almost uncertain. The Dominion was created to prevent war. To end suffering. To bring order to a galaxy that had torn itself apart for millions of cycles. We succeeded. We brought peace. It paused. But perhaps we forgot that peace is supposed to be the foundation for something greater, not the ceiling that prevents growth. Harlow took a careful step forward. Then let us help you remember. Not by tearing down what you've built, but by adding what's been missing. You have the order. We have the chaos. Together, maybe we can find balance. The arbiter's form began to change. Not dissolving or becoming threatening, but transforming into something new. Multiple forms within one, representing the diversity it had spent so long suppressing. When it spoke again, its voice carried harmonics that suggested internal debate, multiple perspectives existing simultaneously. The Dominion will enter a new phase. Humanity will be granted provisional membership, not as subjects but as partners. You will help us remember what we have forgotten. In exchange, we will teach you what we have learned. This process will take generations. It will be difficult. There will be resistance and setbacks. The entity's multiple forms aligned into a single, clear image. But perhaps that is exactly what both our peoples need. The courage to grow instead of simply endure. The chamber erupted in sounds that translated as everything from approval to outrage. But beneath it all, Harlow heard something else. Hope. The kind of fragile, precious hope that comes when people realize change is possible. He looked back at his crew. Torres was crying openly. Ortega was grinning like a fool. Park had her arm around young Chen, who looked stunned. 43 ordinary humans who had refused to be ordinary when it mattered most. They had come seeking a new home among the stars. Instead, they had sparked something that might reshape the galaxy itself. Not through weapons or conquest, but through the simple, stubborn insistence that there had to be more to existence than mere survival. That dreams mattered as much as order. That the chaos of growth was worth the risk of failure. As the gathering dispersed and the humans prepared for the long journey of integration, Harlow stood alone for a moment in the observation garden. The geometric flowers still grew in their perfect spirals. But nearby, Chen's wild earth plants sprawled in beautiful disorder. Both were real. Both had value. And maybe, just maybe, both could learn to grow together. The stars beyond the structure looked different now. Not wrong, as they had that first terrifying day. Just new. Full of possibility. Full of hope. And somewhere out there, Earth waited. Eventually, humanity would return home with the greatest gift any explorer could bring. Proof that even in the vastness of space, even facing powers beyond imagination, the human spirit could not be broken. It could only shine brighter. The third morning found Natalie in Julian's office at 5:30, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and amber. Julian stood by the window, coffee in hand, his profile outlined against the emerging light. He seemed lost in thought, and Natalie noticed the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "Rough night?" she asked gently. He turned, and she saw the weariness there. "I had to make a decision that will affect 200 people. No matter what I choose, someone gets hurt." He gestured to the conference table where files and financial reports were spread out. "Come. I want to show you the part of leadership nobody applauds. For the next hour, Julian walked her through a crisis. One of their manufacturing facilities was operating at a loss, and the numbers showed it wasn't sustainable. He had three options: close the facility and relocate operations, which would mean layoffs for 200 workers in a small town where Horizon Industries was the primary employer, invest heavily in modernization, which could save jobs but would risk other projects and potentially thousands of other positions if it failed, or sell the facility to a competitor who would keep it running but under conditions that might ultimately be worse for workers. What would you do? Julian asked, his eyes searching hers. Natalie studied the reports, feeling the weight of the decision. I don't know. Every option has consequences. Exactly, Julian said quietly. This is what keeps me up at night. Not profit margins or stock prices, but the knowledge that my decisions directly impact real people with families, mortgages, dreams. There's no perfect answer, only the least harmful path forward. What did you decide? Julian sat down heavily. Modernization. It's the riskiest option financially, but it gives those 200 people a fighting chance to keep their jobs and their community intact. I'm betting our reserves and upcoming projects on the hope that technology and retraining will turn things around. That's a massive risk, Natalie said. It is, he acknowledged. And if I'm wrong, the board will have legitimate grounds to question my judgment. But I didn't build this company to maximize profit at the expense of people. I built it to prove that you can do both, succeed financially while protecting those who depend on you. Grace knocked and entered with a worried expression. Julian, Michael Chen is here. He says it's urgent. When the past meets the present. Michael Chen burst into the office moments later, and Natalie was surprised to see Julian's usual composure crack into genuine joy. The two men embraced warmly, and Natalie noticed that Michael, unlike almost everyone else, called him Jules. Natalie, this is Michael, my oldest friend, Julian introduced them. We grew up together. He's an architect now, designing sustainable housing projects. Michael was warm and friendly, with an easy smile, but his eyes were troubled. Jules, I need advice. The Riverside project is falling apart. Over the next 30 minutes, Natalie listened as Michael explained his crisis. He'd designed an affordable housing complex meant to revitalize a struggling neighborhood, but the investors were pressuring him to cut corners on materials and raise rents beyond what the target community could afford. If I don't compromise, they'll pull funding and the project dies, Michael said, running his hands through his hair. But if I do compromise, I'll be building the exact kind of predatory development I became an architect to prevent. Julian listened intently, asking probing questions. Finally, he said, how much additional funding would you need to build it right and keep rents affordable? Michael named a figure, and Julian pulled out his phone. Within minutes, he'd arranged a meeting with 3 potential investors and committed to personally covering 20% of the needed capital. Jules, you can't, Michael protested. I can and I will, Julian interrupted firmly. You taught me to stand by my principles when we were kids, remember? When those bullies tried to make me join their gang in 9th grade, you were the one who stood with me and said principles matter more than popularity. This is me returning the favor. After Michael left, Natalie studied Julian with new eyes. How much of your personal wealth do you invest in projects like that? Honestly? I don't keep track, Julian admitted. Money beyond a certain point is just numbers. Impact is what matters. Michael's project will provide homes for 300 families who are currently struggling. That's worth more than any return on investment. That afternoon brought a crisis that tested everything Natalie had learned about Julian. Rebecca Stone, CEO of their primary competitor, requested an urgent meeting. Grace's expression was grim as she delivered the message. Rebecca doesn't do urgent meetings unless she has leverage, Julian explained to Natalie. This will be interesting. Rebecca arrived at 2, impeccably dressed in a crimson suit that matched her reputation for ruthless business tactics. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Julian," she greeted him coolly, then glanced at Natalie. "Your new assistant." "Natalie is shadowing me this week, observing leadership in action," Julian said evenly. "She'll stay." Rebecca's smile turned predatory. "Perfect. She should see this." She placed a folder on the table. "I'm here to offer you a deal. Merge with Stone Enterprises. You'll have a seat on the board, significant equity, and we'll combine resources to dominate the market." Julian didn't touch the folder. "We're competitors, Rebecca, not allies." "Why would I even consider this?" "Because I know about the manufacturing facility crisis," Rebecca said bluntly. "I know you're gambling company resources on a modernization plan that could bankrupt you. I know you've turned down more lucrative contracts because they didn't align with your principles. Your sentimentality is admirable, Julian, but it's killing your competitive edge." She leaned forward. "Merge with me, and I'll make sure those 200 jobs are protected. We'll modernize the facility under Stone Enterprises resources. Your people keep working, and you stop making decisions based on emotions instead of logic." Natalie held her breath, watching Julian's face. This was the easy way out, the solution that protected jobs while removing his personal risk. Julian stood and walked to the window, his back to them. When he turned, his expression was steel wrapped in silk. "No." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Julian repeated calmly. "You're offering to save jobs while stripping away everything that makes this company what it is. Under your leadership, those workers would become expendable resources to be optimized and discarded. You'd protect them for a year, maybe two, then close the facility anyway once you'd extracted maximum value." "That's business," Rebecca said coldly. "No," Julian countered, "that's your version of business. Mine is different. I don't sacrifice principles for profit, and I don't betray the people who've built this company alongside me. You can take your offer and leave." Rebecca stood, fury flashing across her face. "You're making a mistake, Julian. When your modernization plan fails and your board removes you, remember I offered you a way out. If I fail, I'll fail knowing I stayed true to what matters," Julian said quietly. "That's worth more than any merger with you could ever offer." After Rebecca left, Natalie exhaled shakily. "She's going to come after you. You know that, right?" "Yes," Julian acknowledged, returning to his chair. He looked tired suddenly, the weight of constant battles evident. "Rebecca's been circling for years, waiting for me to make a mistake big enough to exploit." "Why did you really turn her down?" Natalie asked. "Be honest." Julian met her eyes, and she saw something raw there, something vulnerable. "Because some things aren't for sale. My integrity, my responsibility to my employees, the promise I made to myself when I started this company, those aren't negotiable. Rebecca sees business as war, where victory means crushing opponents. I see it as stewardship, where success means lifting everyone up together." He stood and walked to her, stopping close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "This is the truth you wanted to see, Natalie. I make hard choices, and sometimes they cost me. I turn down opportunities that would make me wealthier because they'd require me to compromise who I am. I lose sleep over decisions that affect people I'll never meet. And I do it all while knowing that one major failure could destroy everything I've built." "But you keep going," Natalie whispered. "Because what's the alternative?" Julian asked. "Become like Rebecca? Sacrifice principles for profit? I'd rather fail while trying to do right than succeed at any cost." The confession. The week's final day arrived too quickly. Natalie had filled 3 notebooks with observations, insights, and revelations. She'd seen Julian negotiate with impossible grace, comfort grieving employees, challenge his executive team to think bigger, and maintain his principles even when they cost him dearly. But more than that, she'd seen his humanity, the way he rubbed his temples when stressed, his soft laugh at unexpected jokes, the gentleness in his voice when speaking to people struggling. She'd watched him work 18-hour days while checking on sick employees, reviewing innovation proposals from junior staff, and personally writing thank-you notes to retiring workers. On Friday evening, as the office emptied for the weekend, Julian invited her to his office one final well, he said, leaning against his desk, "You've had your week behind the curtain. What's your verdict? Am I everything they say, or was it all just carefully orchestrated public relations?" Natalie set down her notebooks and stood, walking to where he waited. The setting sun painted everything in warm amber light, and she could see every detail of his face, the fine lines around his eyes from too many sleepless nights, the silver in his hair earned through carrying impossible weight, the carefully controlled expression that hid so much time. "You're not what they say," she said finally. Julian's expression flickered with something like disappointment, but she continued. "You're more. They say you're brilliant, and you are, but they don't mention the cost of that brilliance. The sleepless nights, the impossible choices, the weight you carry for thousands of people. They say you're generous, but they don't understand it's not about charity, it's about remembering where you came from and refusing to let success make you forget." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something intimate. "They say you're perfect, but you're not. You're human. You doubt yourself, you fear failure, you carry guilt for decisions that had no good options. You work yourself to exhaustion because you care too much, and you hide that vulnerability behind professionalism because you think leaders aren't allowed to be uncertain." Julian's careful control was cracking, emotion shining through. "Natalie. They idolize you for the wrong reasons," she interrupted gently. "They should admire you not because you're untouchable, but because you're everything I hoped to find and was afraid didn't exist, a leader who leads with humanity, who succeeds without sacrificing principles, who has power and uses it to lift others up." "I don't feel powerful," Julian admitted, his voice rough. "Most days I feel like I'm barely holding everything together, hoping I don't fail the people depending on me." "I know," Natalie said softly. "I've watched you this week. I've seen the weight you carry, and I've seen how alone you are in carrying it. That's the truth they don't see, that being the person everyone looks up to means there's no one for you to lean on." Julian's eyes held hers, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with something beyond professional respect, beyond admiration. "This week was supposed to prove who I am to you," he said quietly. "Instead, you've somehow seen more of me than anyone has in years." "How did you do that?" "Because I stopped looking at the legend and started seeing the man," Natalie replied. Julian reached out slowly, giving her time to step away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing gently across her skin. The touch sent electricity racing through her. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "When I heard you in that break room questioning who I really was, it awakened something I'd buried for years. I convinced myself I couldn't afford personal connections, that relationships would complicate leadership, that being alone was the price of success." "And now?" Natalie asked, her heart pounding. "Now I think I was wrong," Julian admitted. "Watching you truly see me this week, having someone I can be completely honest with, it made me realize how empty success feels when you have no one to share it with. You challenged me, questioned me, pushed me to be transparent in ways I haven't allowed myself to be. And somewhere in this week, you became more than just someone I was proving myself to." Natalie's breath caught. "Julian. I'm not asking you for anything," he interrupted gently. "I know the complications, I'm your boss, there's a power dynamic, this could be disastrous. But I needed you to know the truth. This week changed something for me. You changed something for me." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, emotion overwhelming her. "You changed something for me too," she whispered. "I came into this expecting to expose a facade. Instead, I found someone who makes me want to be braver, more principled, more willing to fight for what matters even when it costs me. So where does that leave us? Julian asked, his forehead nearly touching hers. I don't know, Natalie admitted honestly. But I know I don't want to pretend this week didn't mean something. I don't want to go back to being just another employee you pass in the hallway. Julian's smile was tender, touched with hope and uncertainty. Then let's not. Let's figure this out together, whatever this is. Slowly, carefully, honestly. No more masks, no more legends, just two people trying to navigate something real. I'd like that, Natalie said, smiling through her tears. Good, Julian whispered. Then, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned in and pressed his lips to her forehead, a kiss so gentle and reverent it made her heart ache. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion. Thank you, Natalie Rivers, for asking the question that started all of this. For being brave enough to demand the truth. For seeing me. Thank you for answering, she replied. For trusting me with who you really are. They stood together as the sun set completely, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside the windows. Two people who'd started the week as strangers, bound by a challenge that had transformed into something neither had expected, understanding, respect, connection, and the fragile beginning of something that felt remarkably like hope. Epilogue, 6 months later. The manufacturing facility's modernization was completed ahead of schedule and under budget. Julian's gamble paid off, productivity increased, worker satisfaction soared, and the facility became a model for sustainable business practices. Rebecca Stone launched a hostile takeover attempt that failed spectacularly when Horizon Industries employees rallied behind Julian, many going public with stories of how he'd supported them through personal crises. Thomas Rivera returned to work and was promoted to facilities manager, using his experience to mentor new employees. Michael Chen's housing project was completed, providing affordable homes for 300 families and winning multiple architectural awards. And Natalie? She was promoted to Director of Corporate Culture, a new position created specifically to ensure Horizon Industries maintained its people-first values as it grew. She also became the person Julian turned to when the weight felt too heavy, not as his employee, but as his partner in both business and life. On a quiet Saturday morning, Natalie stood in Julian's home office, watching him work on plans for a new initiative to provide college scholarships for employees' children. He looked up and smiled, that devastating smile that still made her heart race. What are you thinking about? He asked. About a question I asked 6 months ago, Natalie replied, walking over to where he sat. About whether you were everything people said you were. Julian pulled her gently onto his lap, his arms wrapping around her. And what's your answer now? Natalie touched his face tenderly. My answer is that you're exactly who you needed to be to change my entire understanding of what leadership, success, and love can look like. You're not perfect. You're better than perfect, you're real. Julian kissed her softly, a promise and a truth wrapped in tenderness. We're real, he corrected. Together. Outside, the city awakened to a new day, full of challenges and opportunities, struggles and triumphs. And in that quiet moment, two people who'd found each other through honesty and courage knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, not as legend and observer, but as partners building something genuine in a world that desperately needed it.